Hey guys, this is Miss Miners here on day 20. This is the last day of this week and the last day of this tech set where we are talking about why it's important to face challenges. And more specifically, we've been talking about the word courage and bravery and how we can show courage in our everyday lives. So our book today is by Omar S. Castaneda, and it's illustrated by Enrique O. Sanchez, and it's called Abuela's Weave. And it looks like it is an award winner. And this is another book where we will read about a character who faces some challenges with her abuela, which is grandmother, and we'll see how her and her grandmother show courage throughout the story and how they use courage to solve a problem that they discover at the beginning. So again, this book comes from our tech set of Interactive Read Alouds from Fountas Pinnell. So all information here and copyright information is credited to Fountas Pinnell. All right, so as we read, again, be thinking about what challenges these characters face and how they show courage as they face them. So the setting of our story is that our story takes place in Guatemala, which is a country in Central America. And our young girl right here's name is Esperanza, and this is her grandmother, which she calls Abuela. And her grandmother are weaving, and they are weaving things to sell to make money. Okay? But something happens with the grandmother, with the Abuela, that causes a problem. And I'm not going to give too much away, but I want you to be listening for that problem and think about why it takes courage to overcome that challenge. All right, Abuela's Weave. Pull back hard, old Abuela said. Make it jolt so the threads stay close like family. Yes, Abuela. Esperanza thrust the bolt through the opened weave and pulled the bar down with all her might. Next to her, Esperanza's grandmother, her abuela, also kneeled in front of a backstrap loom. Both looms were tied to the same tree in the middle of the family compound. Esperanza's mother fed the chickens and pigs behind the main thatch hut, while her father was off with her brothers in the field of corn, beans, and coffee. As I read, I want you to pay very close attention to the illustrations and more specifically to Abuela. You're learning, Abuela said. Esperanza looked at her grandmother out of the corner of her eye. She knew that Abuela was nervous about the market. Her mother said that the huipiles and tapestries Abuela made could pull the wonder right out of people. But these days, more and more goods were made by machines. Esperanza worried that people would tease Abuela about her birthmark, as some kids had once done. They had started a rumor that she was a witch, and now many people were frightened to buy things from her. I want you to look very closely at Abuela's face and see if you can notice what Esperanza's talking about. So if you look, Abuela has a birthmark right there. And the reason that this is a problem is because people have seen it, mainly kids, and they've made fun of her, and they have started rumors and stories that she's a witch. So then when Abuela and Esperanza go to the market to sell their goods, no one comes over to them because they're scared that Abuela is a witch. Why do you think that might be a problem for them? And how do you think they might solve that? Daydreaming again? Abuela asked. Yes, Abuela. Well, the old woman said gruffly, get busy because there are too few days left. You still have a lot of work to do, and there will be many other people selling the same things you have. Don't worry, Abuela. I'll be busy until we leave. And she was. Esperanza and her grandmother worked from early morning even before the sun rose, to well past sunset, when the moon rose, and the compound fire gave everything the rich smell of pine. They showed no one their work, not even Esperanza's mother, because it was a special thing that they wove. They wanted to wait for the Fiesta de Pueblos in Guate to reveal it. So they're weaving something very special. That's a secret. Soon the day arrived, bright with sun, the leaves glistening from the previous night's rain. It seemed like a good omen for Esperanza and her grandmother. Abuela appeared disguised as a woman in mourning. Dressed in black, she wrapped a long black shawl around her shoulders and across her face so that only her eyes appeared to the world. Esperanza, however, wore her favorite huipil. It was a white blouse with red, blue, and green threads in the rectangular collar. Under that, the colors bled into silver and blue, and hidden within the intricate designs of the blouse were tiny quetzals flying freely in the threads the way they once flew in the great forests of Guatemala. So let's look at Abuela in the background, right here. Why do you think she's dressed that way? You see Esperanza in the way that she's dressed, but why do you think Abuela is dressed that way? She carried on her head a large straw basket full of her huipiles, tablecloths, skirts, and the special tapestry. Esperanza walked steadily down the dirt avenue of Santa Cruz to get to the highway where the Guate bus would pick them up. Abuela walked several paces behind. She insisted that they pretend they did not know each other. This way, if my birthmark frightens customers, they will still buy from you, Abuela explained. When the bus came, Abuela did not even help lift the heavy basket to the boys who strapped bags onto the roof of the bus. Inside, they sat 3 seats apart, as if they were strangers, people living in different villages, people with no ancestors in common. So they've done all this hard work together, Esperanza and her Abuela, but yet on the bus, here's Esperanza and her Abuela is all the way back here. Why are they pretending to be strangers? Do you think they're going to continue to do that all the way to the market? What do you think this is going to have anything to do with courage? And who do you think might have to show courage? When they arrived, the noise in the city was deafening. Large buses roared down the narrow streets, emitting clouds of black fumes. Horns blasted, and people hurried roughly down the sidewalks. Esperanza wanted more than anything to get off the Sexta Avenida, where people jammed the walkways and hawkers yelled from their shops or from the hundreds of carts blocking the sidewalks and streets. She felt trapped. Her lungs ached from the automobile and bus fumes, and her ears rang with the sounds of screeching brakes, horns, shouting, and the whistles of policemen. Esperanza walked quickly, the basket steady upon her head, her mind trying to focus away from the commotion and onto the stalls set up for the fiesta in the Parque Central. So here I want you to look at this illustration and I want you to find Esperanza and Abuela. See if you can find the two of them. And then I want you to ask yourself, do you think that Abuela should help Esperanza at the market or no? Do you think they should continue to be strangers or do you think they should work together? And why? She walked furiously, zigzagging to get down to Avenida Ocho, or the Septima Avenida, where the noise was less, when she suddenly stopped to see if Abuela was still following behind. She looked for a familiar face among the bobbing heads, the baskets, the helmets, and hats. She wanted to catch just a sight of her grandmother's shawl, like a blackbird hopping from branch to branch in a forest of people, but she could not find her. Esperanza continued to the market, hoping Abuela would eventually find her there among the other merchants. The stalls were already filled when Esperanza arrived. Old men and women nearby shooed her away or ignored her when she asked for help. So right now we see it's just Esperanza here. Why do you think people are shooing her away like this and just ignoring her? Do you think they would act the same way if her Abuela was with her? How could she show courage right now? What do you think she might do? At last, all she could do was set her basket between the narrow slats of two stalls. On one side, a family from Antigua sold pottery. Reproductions of Mayan crafts and clothing loomed in one of the many factories. The woman on the other side sold long bolts of cloth, musical instruments, and decorative bags. The bags all had zippers machined in the capital and long handles of colorful plastic. Everything was beautiful, Esperanza thought. She thought that no one would buy anything from her. She and her grandmother would return to Santa Cruz with no money, the long hours wasted, and the family disappointed. So, what's the problem so far in the story? There's actually a few different problems. If you think about the problem with Abuela, but now there's also a problem with Esperanza. And what do you think's going to happen? Do you think they're going to solve their problem? And what role do you think courage might play in helping them face their challenges? Esperanza sadly took out her wares to hang them one by one on long splinters in the slat wood on either side. She felt terribly alone. Even her poor Abuelita was nowhere to be seen. The people slowly noticed. They pointed at the elaborate weaving. Tourists and Guatemalans alike drew closer to her tiny place and looked up with wonder at the beautiful work in front of them. The large tapestry blossomed with images of Guatemala. Esperanza and Abuela had worked in intricate symbols of the country's history. There were heroines and heroes inspired by the glorious Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Maya. And in one corner, a beautiful quetzal seemed to watch over it all from within a white cage. In Esperanza's hands, the tapestry's colors shone as brightly as the sun over Guatemala's Lake Atitlan. So Esperanza and her Abuela wove that whole thing. And in it, there are little symbols that represent the country that they live in. People turned from the commercial stalls to stand before Esperanza's complex weaving. When she looked up, Esperanza saw Abuela with a smile across her birthmarked face. It didn't take long for all of their work to be sold that day. The people were disappointed when all was gone, but Esperanza promised to return with new things the following month. So, what do you notice about Abuela on this page? Take a real close look. If you notice right here, she looks different than she did in the whole rest of the story. Something about her face. Why do you think she's uncovered her face now? Did she show courage? And how? And why? And on the way back to Santa Cruz, grandmother and granddaughter sat side by side. Esperanza's smooth and nimble fingers held tightly in her abuela's wrinkled old hands. The end. So at the beginning, we have Esperanza and Abuela, and they are working so hard to weave this secretive thing that they want to sell at the market, but there's a problem. And all throughout the story, they seem to separate. And they separate because of the first problem. But then once they're separated, there becomes another problem. So there's another challenge they have to face. So as you think about this story, I want you to think about the different problems that Esperanza and her abuela faced throughout the story and how they each showed courage to overcome those challenges. Well, like I said, this was our last book of the week. So this kind of wraps up our second week of text sets, and this is also going to wrap up our question of why it's important to face challenges, and more specifically, how we can use courage and bravery to face those challenges. So I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to these stories. I think next week we will be doing some more stories. I haven't gotten those together yet, but I will, so I'm not sure what those talk about. But if you check back in next week, you will see some more stories. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to them. I hope you guys are still working hard on your packets and answering your questions. I miss you guys a lot. I hope you're having fun, but also working hard and staying safe. I can't wait to see you guys, and hopefully we will be back at school soon. But until then, just continue to check Dojo, and I will see you guys soon.